Assisi, an Italian city in central Umbria and a UNESCO Cultural Heritage Site since 2000, has kept its medieval features almost intact. Today, Assisi, the city of Saints Francis and Clare, continues to draw millions of pilgrims each year from all over the world. Arnaldo Fortini, mayor of Assisi until March 1st, 1944, described his city's value in a letter to Mussolini.
Assisi is the birthplace of St. Francis and the city which, after Rome and Jerusalem, was renowned for its tradition of holiness, its artistic treasures and its noble worth. The city which moved Dante to salute it as the Novissimo Oriente, the newest horizon, the city which shines brightly on the heights of the human spirit. Today, Assisi is threatened by war. The wonderful church built over the remains of the seraphic saint is already caught up in a whirlpool of battle. And together with the famous tri-level basilica immortalized by Cimabue, Giotto and Simone Martini, other Franciscan churches are likewise in danger. For centuries, the faithful from every nation have come on pilgrimage. In 1926, the 7th centenary of St. Francis's death, 2 million visitors came from every nation. The many convents and monasteries, English, American, Bavarian, Spanish and French, the general headquarters of a flourishing missionary association, the admiration of art lovers, all have made Assisi an international center of culture and faith.
During World War II, Assisi was threatened with destruction similar to that of many other cultural monuments, such as the Benedictine monastery at Monte Cassino. On February 15, 1944, the Allied troops bombed that monastery for more than 3 hours, killing 250 refugees and monks. Only the crypt withstood the attack. How could things have gone so far? In 1928-29, a fascist dictatorship was established in Italy under Benito Mussolini. Originally, he kept his distance from Adolf Hitler and his racist ideology. But from 1934 onwards, he drew increasingly closer to it. In 1936, Mussolini promulgated the Berlin-Rome Axis and thereby acknowledged an alliance with Hitler. In 1937, he left the League of Nations and entered into an alliance with Germany and Imperial Japan. In 1938, Italy adopted anti-Semitic laws. Mussolini aimed to create a new Roman Empire throughout the Mediterranean area. In June 1940, he declared war against England and France. The so-called Allied campaign in Italy began in March 1943 and lasted until the end of the war. As a result, an estimated 60,000 Allied and 50,000 German soldiers died. One of the most costly theaters of war in Western Europe. After several defeats in July 1943, Mussolini was removed and imprisoned by the Fascist Supreme Council. On September 8, 1943, Italy became allied with the Americans, initiating the German campaign against Italy. And on September 9th, Assisi was occupied by the Germans. On October 16th, the Germans began the evacuation of the Jewish ghetto in Rome. At the end of October, bombing raids began near Assisi. On January 7th, 17 Assisians died in an attack on the nearby Sant'Egidio airport. On March 1st, 1944, Dr. Müller was installed as commander of the city of Assisi. From the chronicles of the Sacro Convento of the Conventual Franciscans, the entry for June 16th, the day before the liberation, reads: During the night, the English began bombardments in the valley, and they drew closer. The Assisians and all the others ran to the tomb of the saint.
Quando sono arrivati gli alleati,
When the Allied forces advanced closer to Assisi, Müller said to himself, I won't allow Assisi, this sacred place, to be destroyed like Monte Cassino, just because some Germans are infuriated. So what did he do? He positioned himself with 2 soldiers at the gate of San Pietro for the whole night. And when the German motorcade arrived, he ordered them to drive on to Perugia. When finally the last one had passed by, he bought a large bouquet of carnations. Sorry, I am still so moved by this. When Müller with his 2 companions arrived, we had already been hearing gunshots. At the same time, a mill at Santa Maria degli Angeli completely burned down. The sound of cannons echoed through the entire valley. So Müller with his 2 soldiers came to our door to say goodbye, because he knew us quite well, especially our vicar, Father Spagnolo. Then he brought the flowers down to the tomb of St. Francis and left afterwards, waving to us as he departed. We were so terrified because the Allies had started firing. We were hoping they would not capture Müller. We even ran to the courtyard to check on his military vehicle, already under fire from behind. Other German troops, however, were hiding behind a hill. In the afternoon, when the Allies' tanks advanced to the Piazza Comune and drove up toward us, I was present. The friars rang all the church bells, not realizing that the Germans had not gone very far. So they tried to hit the columns of our courtyard with their cannons, but they did not succeed. They managed to hit the walls that were 14 meters thick. At the same time, we hid near the tomb of St. Francis, in the lower basilica, because the whole city was shuddering under the attack. After 2 powerful cannon volleys, we thought our bell tower had been hit and collapsed. That was a most terrible moment for us.
In his historical documentation, Professor Santucci writes, Several days before his meeting with Bishop Nicolini, Colonel Müller went to Foligno for a meeting with Marshal Kesselring. Müller expressed his concern that the retreating German troops might try to occupy the city. Kesselring then informed him that he would issue a special order forbidding German military troops from entering Assisi. Müller's generous and self-sacrificing work, however, was not yet finished, when in fact the first retreating German troops arrived on the plain below Assisi. The colonel placed guards around the clock at all the gates of the city, using his own hospital personnel to prevent the German troops from entering the city. Müller had a barricade placed at Santa Maria degli Angeli, also near Santa Maria delle Grazie, to make the last retreating German troops understand that they were not to go up to Assisi. As the Anglo-American troops drew nearer, during the second week of June, Müller received orders to evacuate the 2,000 German wounded and the hospital personnel from Assisi. He took personal command of the whole operation to make sure that no harm was done to anything that was being abandoned: buildings, furnishings, equipment. Every few days during the war, Müller wrote home to his beloved wife and 2 children. He was always thinking of them. Unfortunately, his letters from Assisi have not been preserved. His earlier letters, however, provide good information about events, what he was doing, and what was important to him.
July 12, 1942. I am often quite amazed that I have such a talent for multitasking. I am on my feet all day long, from morning to evening, quickly taking care of this and that. 1 minute I am taking care of a severely wounded person, and the next minute I am in the kitchen where food is prepared for almost 1,000 men. Then I am in my office on the phone dozens of times. Or I have to greet persons who think they are important, and later I am giving special instruction to the gardener, then renovating a surgical theater, then I had little stoves set up in every house, then taking care of electrical work, directing arrivals and departures, and with the doctors I visit the patients and homes.
The convoy of the wounded left Assisi on the morning of June 15th, and Müller entrusted the city to the command of his assistant. He wanted to remain in Assisi until the very last moment. The Allies were already on the plain between Foligno and Rivotorto. The German rear guard arrived that very same day at Santa Maria degli Angeli. There was a risk that those German soldiers might come up to Assisi to set up positions. Müller alone was capable of averting that danger. It is true that there were very clear promises not to do so, made by Kesselring the previous month, but there was still a danger. Moreover, the rear guard was a battalion of SS troops known for their atrocities and autonomy. If they had decided to go to Assisi, it would have been the end of all diplomatic efforts going on for 10 months. In fact, the presence of SS troops in Assisi would have inevitably provoked an Allied attack upon the city. Therefore, as night fell on June 15th, Müller positioned himself outside the main gate of Assisi. From the valley he heard the sounds of demolition and could see the striking images of buildings set afire by the angry SS troops. The next day some of the SS troops came up to Assisi. Müller and they began a heated debate, but the verbal exchange, though brief, was nevertheless long enough for him to convince the German rearguard to abandon the city. May 10th, 1942.
I allow myself to express my opinions quite strongly.
Valentin Müller was born in 1891 at Zeilitzheim in Lower Franconia, Bavaria, and baptized Catholic, one of two sons of the village carpenter. In 1904, an uncle priest encouraged him to attend the minor seminary at Würzburg. By 1911, he started medical school. As a medical student, Müller served in World War I and was awarded the Bavarian Silver Medal for bravery for saving some injured soldiers at the front line. Unfortunately, he was imprisoned by the British Army but later liberated in a prisoner exchange. After the war, he completed his studies and settled in 1919 as a medical doctor with a practice first in Emsing and later in Titting as a head doctor of a little hospital. In 1922 he married Maria Hofer. They had two children, a son Robert and a daughter Irmgard, both of whom became medical doctors. At the outbreak of World War II, Müller had already established a medical practice in Eichstätt, Upper Bavaria. He moved there in 1933 because of problems with the local Nazi authorities. In 1937, Dr. Valentin Müller purchased a house from a Jewish family. He was the last medical doctor in Eichstätt to visit Jewish homes for treatment. He was never a member of the Nazi Party. In 1939 he was called to war again and was involved in the campaigns against Poland, Russia, France and Italy. From the war front in Russia, Müller wrote to his wife and children.
June 2nd, 1942. It is always the same experience when I enter a Russian home. I sense the fear and see the mistrust in their eyes. Then, as I softly begin to speak, or touch the person gently, or hold their hand to calm them down, I slowly see trust build up in them. Their misery, pain, and disease then surface, and they are simply suffering human beings, not my enemy. Today, I treated a 4-year-old girl who was badly wounded. When I entered her home, she shouted and cried. But within a short time, she became my little friend and laughed with me.
His concern for his patients had shown through in these words. Another letter recounted that he was threatened and put under surveillance by the army because of his religious beliefs.
How desperately we need the Our Father today, and how few pray it. For my part, I need our Lord very much. Recently, I corrected a soldier for using foul language, and no one supported me. Nevertheless, I managed to stop him. Even though alone, I am not afraid. I respect others' opinions, but I won't tolerate an attack on what is holy to me. April 15th, 1942. the Commander General expressed his admiration for my work for the good care the wounded were receiving. The repeatedly trouble-free transports and the fact that at every attack I personally hurried to take care of the wounded to bring them immediate help. I don't make too much of this praise from the commanders. The most important thing is that in my heart I know that I am doing good. I certainly have a guardian angel. Yesterday afternoon, one of my orderlies, also a religious, unexpectedly decided to celebrate Mass in a house that was riddled with bullet holes. That is always something sublime and fortifying for me, even if I am the only officer taking part.
In Stalingrad in 1942, he established the first military hospital. Several days before the Red Army surrounded the city, Müller was sent to Lourdes, the pilgrimage sanctuary in southern France, where he had to establish a division for medical transport. As head of that division, he arrived in Italy in 1943. While he was replacing the medical general of the troops of southern Italy, he heard about the general's plan to establish Assisi as a hospital city. Müller succeeded in getting himself assigned to Assisi as commander, eventually receiving more than 2,000 sick and injured people.
New Year 1942. Last evening I had another little experience. It was already dark when a Russian came and said that his wife was sick. No one could understand what he wanted. However, I soon suspected what it could be. I packed up a scrub brush and a few syringes. It was about 2 kilometers away. As soon as I arrived, I knew what it was. A 41-year-old woman had had a miscarriage and was bleeding to death. The Russian and the woman did not want to believe it. However, I was able to remove the remaining half of the placenta. The woman, who was at death's door, soon got better.
Wherever he went, Müller always was most concerned about people's well-being. He made no distinction between Russians, French, Germans, or Italians.
Tutti I nomi registrati dal comune.
If I am correct, the total number of names registered in Assisi during the war was 4,637. An incredible number, no? They came from cities and were on the run from the places the Allies had bombed.
Graziella Viterbi, the 16-17-year-old daughter of a famous Jewish professor from Padua, took refuge in Assisi. Hundreds of Jews from all over Italy sought refuge wherever they could find it. Some 300 Jews were hidden in the little city of Assisi. I was 17 years old and we were living in an apartment using false identity papers for almost a year. Like all the other refugees, we were very well received. They treated us like everyone else. Those who knew about us were the bishop, Don Aldo, and Padre Rufino Nicacci, and of course the Brizzis, who had printed our identity papers. We remained friends with the bishop for a long time. He personally took care of our ritual and religious belongings. And he did it. Müller did it. I say, he saved the city.
Sì, è stato, direi che è quello che ha salvato la città.
Come si fa a immaginare che non sapessi? Non è possibile. Lui sapeva, faceva finta di non
I
sapere.
simply can't imagine that Müller would have been unaware of the hidden Jews. It's impossible. He knew everything. I think that he already knew by December 1943, at the latest by Christmas Eve. At that moment, a concert was given at San Francesco by a musician named Fano. Müller was seated in the first row. Shouldn't he have asked himself, is this man not a Jew? Yes or no? In any case, Müller sat next to Nicolini and both enjoyed the concert.
Ma lui è stato lì tranquillamente a fianco di Nicolini ad assistere al concerto e a godere la musica che amava.
L'incontro col vescovo
We
spessissimo
often were the bishop's guests, because he himself hailed from northern Italy and was so happy to speak with fellow countrymen. Indeed, an extraordinary person. Frequently, he gave us a little bottle of oil or wine. He was very special. When we arrived in Assisi, the next morning we went to the piazza in order to begin to know the city. And there we met a very close friend from Padua who told us about a secret organization directed by the bishop himself. So we approached him.
che fa capo al vescovo e noi ci siamo rivolti a lui per le cause false.
Graziella Viterbi's father writes, during the last period of the occupation, the episcopal palace of Bishop Nicolini had become an asylum for a great number of refugees and persons who were being persecuted. Nonetheless, when I went to him to ask if in the case of extreme difficulty he could house me and my family, with great simplicity and a gentle smile he said, "There is no room left except my bedroom and my office. However, I can sleep in my office. The bedroom is yours." This is what this distinguished prelate of Assisi was like. In this film about the work of Colonel Müller, the question about hiding refugees is only a sideline consideration. More importantly, we would like to note that the movie, The Assisi Underground, deviates from the historical facts. Don Aldo Brunacci always said, "It is fiction."
Una storia particolare è quella che racconta che quando ci fu l'armistizio.
There is a story I'd like to tell from the time when the Italian king had escaped to the territory occupied by the British and Americans. At that time, the fascist leaders of Perugia came to our hotel and forced my grand-uncle, the owner of the hotel, to change the name of the hotel from Savoia to Ettore Muti, a fascist hero pilot. When Müller returned to the hotel in the evening, my uncle, somewhat depressed, told him what happened. Müller simply asked, "Do you agree?" How would you name it? My uncle said that if the name really had to be changed, it should be called Hotel Stoppini, our family's name. Immediately, Colonel Müller called Perugia and told them the hotel's name changed today and is Hotel Stoppini. He hung up the phone and the discussion was finished.
Savoia si chiama Hotel Stoppini. Chiuse il telefono e scongiurò questo sgradito cambiamento di nome alla struttura.
Mio papà racconta che di questa storia ha sentito.
My father told me this story he himself heard. The other taxi drivers told him what Müller had done for them. Once, 2 German officers confiscated 2 taxis. Müller mounted his motorcycle and followed the 2 officers all the way to Perugia, where he apprehended them and forced them to return the stolen vehicles. Francesco Petti Rossi, one of the 2 taxi drivers, never forgot the Colonello and told everyone who it was who brought his taxi back to him. Another time, German soldiers confiscated all the bicycles they found and loaded them onto a truck. Only upon Müller's command did the soldiers unload the truck and return the bicycles. Once at night, Müller ran to help a young woman and her children who were being harassed by drunken soldiers. At risk to himself, he also helped the young wife of an Italian interned in a German concentration camp get a letter to her husband. He took her letter and put it in an envelope with his own name on it as the sender. At the hospital, he not only treated wounded soldiers, but also cared for all the sick and injured without cost. He even made house calls. The high esteem in which the people held him can be seen in the fact that the resistance fighters in the area around Assisi were told, "Don't even touch a hair of Colonel Müller's head." All this serves to give us a clear picture of what kind of person Valentin Müller was. The fact that Assisi and all the people living there were ultimately saved is due most of all to him and an unbelievable collaboration between 2 extraordinary men who were cut from the same cloth. On May 31st, in fact, the German ambassador to the Holy See concerning the city of Assisi communicated, "The Generalissimo of the German forces in Italy has consented to Assisi being declared a hospital city." According to his declaration, at present there is nothing in Assisi except field hospitals and medical units. The same Generalissimo has prohibited the occupation of the city of Assisi by other troops or commands of the Wehrmacht. The greatly desired news, however, communicated by the Secretariat of State, reached Assisi later on, June 21st, after the liberation of Assisi had happened. But already on May 31st, Colonel Müller had gone with 4 officers to give verbal communication of this news to Bishop Nicolini. It was during that meeting that Colonel Müller asked Bishop Nicolini, the Holy See's delegate, for use of the Umbrian Regional Seminary, that large complex just below Assisi on the old road to the Porziuncola. Although the bishop knew he should have first asked the Holy See, the owner of the complex, for such permission, he nonetheless told the German colonel that he could certainly house wounded German soldiers in the seminary. In the afternoon of June 3, 1944, the Umbrian Regional Seminary received its first wounded German soldiers.
L'aver il Monsignor Nicolini dato a Müller il permesso.
Bishop Nicolini allowed Müller to confiscate the rooms of the regional seminary for priests. This large hospital, next to the road leading up to Assisi, was only a few hundred meters away from the city.
Questo grande ospedale, che peraltro è sulla strada che porta ad Assisi, a poche centinaia di metri da Assisi, se fosse rimasto...
Since it was empty, it certainly would have been used by the SS or German rear guard. If just one German soldier, not sick or wounded, appeared in the city with weapons, the Allied forces would have had a good reason for bombing the city.
Non ferito, non malato, ma in armi, per giustificare, direi, l'intervento alleato e quindi i bombardamenti.
At the same time, Colonel Müller was doing his part, designating other buildings of the city for use as military hospitals. On June 5th, the friars of the Sacro Convento decided to give Colonel Müller the use of the upper floor of the Theological College to establish a hospital section there.
Le persone decisive sono due.
No doubt there were people who criticized Müller and Nicolini, but it was crucial for Nicolini to offer the seminary to Müller as a hospital.
A Müller i locali liberi di Assisi per farne degli ospedali. Se non fosse avvenuto questo,
otherwise the SS would have used this large, empty complex, and their presence would have been the cause for an airstrike by the Allied forces. Assisi would have been destroyed as a consequence.
Nella maniera più indiscutibile causato l'intervento aereo degli anglo-americani e quindi la distruzione o comunque il grande danno di Assisi.
Before withdrawing from Assisi, he arranged to have all the medical provisions, general supplies, medicine, beds, blankets, and all kinds of surgical equipment worth approximately 10 million lire given to the Bishop of Assisi for him to distribute. To be precise about it, on Thursday, June 15, 1944, Müller met with the bishop and representatives of the city government in the Hotel Subasio to thank them for their hospitality. He is reported to have said, "Now, at the height of reprisals, people will be tempted to regard as traitors anyone who supported the opposite side." Once again, he risked life and limb for leaving the medical provisions behind. Unfortunately, the ultimate fate of those supplies is still not clear.
Considerazione, un appunto manoscritto.
The handwritten notes of Bishop Nicolini which were discovered were not studied enough, in my opinion. The title on one note was "The Story of the Medical Equipment." To solve this mystery, we need only look at the names Nicolini mentioned. But that never happened. Maybe they didn't want to do it. I don't know why. It certainly was not Nicolini's fault. He was the only bishop who left everything here in the city, books, letters, etc. He took nothing with him.
Partendo da Assisi, ha lasciato tutto ad Assisi, i libri, le lettere, non ha portato via nulla.
The colonel was finally taken prisoner in northern Italy, but was freed shortly after the war and put all his energy into resuming his medical practice in Eichstätt. In spring of 1951, he became severely ill, and only 6 weeks after having stopped working, he died in a hospital in Munich. One of his last visitors there was a close friend and confessor, Father Antonio Cairoli Friar Minor. As he entered the room and before losing consciousness, the dying colonel remarked, "My Assisi has come to me." Dr. Müller died on July 31, 1951, at age 60 of lung cancer, which had traveled to his brain. He was buried in the cemetery of Eichstätt. On his tombstone, one can see the silhouette of St. Francis's Basilica and the Sacro Convento in Assisi. A letter was sent from Arnaldo Fortini. Most kind Madam, I received the sad news of the death of your husband. In that very difficult and delicate period, he was truly a most noble example of virtue, justice, generosity and charity towards all. I shall always recall the last day of his time in Assisi, when I went to thank him for what he had done. He was calm and fearless. Despite the fact that the enemy were several kilometers away, all the citizens will remember him for many years to come, and his name will be engraved in the history of Assisi. In 1950, Müller returned with his wife, son and daughter to Assisi, where he was honored with a hero's welcome. He was showered with numerous invitations from the citizens of Assisi to come visit. Upon his arrival, some women placed flowers at the hotel entrance that formerly served as his headquarters, and the city council was planning to erect a monument in his honor. Dr. Valentin Müller's presence was celebrated in the streets and squares of the city. People crowded around him, shaking his hand, embracing him. During the war, the people used to exclaim, "We've got 3 protectors, our good God, St. Francis and Colonel Müller."
E quando venne nel 51, io ricordo tantissima gente.
One headline read, "The people of Assisi will set up a memorial for him." When Valentin Müller returned with his family in 1950, I still remember all the people gathering in front of Hotel Subasio, clapping their hands. The women embraced him. He wanted to return again. What a man! Unfortunately, the city has not erected the memorial. There was a committee set up. Now, a new discussion is beginning. I always was fascinated by this person.
When we think of the Germans, we automatically think of the Nazis and their atrocities. But this person was human, perhaps because he was a doctor. His profession certainly did influence him. Before all else, he was a human being, a doctor, not a colonel, and a very generous man. And as many have already said, how could he not know? There were many Jews around. His humanity overcame obedience to the Nazi regime. The memory of Il Colonello's important role in preserving Assisi during World War II is still alive among the city's inhabitants. In 1982, a commemorative stone monument was placed in the cloister of the Würzburg Conventual Friary. It was brought to the first Franciscan friary established north of the Alps by a delegation from Assisi led by Don Aldo Brunacci. On a pilgrimage of peace during the 8th centenary of St. Francis's birth. On their journey, the group also stopped at Eichstätt. The Italians brought olive branches to Colonel Müller's grave. In 2005, St. Bonaventure University wanted to give a posthumous service award to Colonel Valentin Müller. We share Don Aldo's praise and heed his request to remember Valentin Müller for his efforts during a most dangerous time to protect the people and the historic sanctuaries of Assisi. Home to all who revere Francis and Clare, the saints who give this town its renown throughout the world.